Let's discuss egalitarianism for a moment. Egalitarianism is certainly not a new concept. Over the past decade, we have observed its emergence here in Brazil, clearly influenced by ideas from abroad. This notion of, oh no, I'm not a feminist, I'm an egalitarian. I'm not a feminist, I am an anti-feminist. This idea that, no, I solely advocate for equal rights. Let's delve into why that's actually nonsense. If you examine egalitarianism, you'll find it originated well before feminism. It began with the concept that all men are equal. Then, logically, this idea was extended to include both women and men, suggesting the sexes are equal. This is a completely incorrect notion, yet it was the initial platform that emerged, paving the way for the creation of feminism. However, we're going to remove certain parts. The initial part that needs to be removed is the notion that just because a woman identifies as an egalitarian and not a feminist, it's acceptable. That's simply not true, as it doesn't relate to the core issue. The fact that she chooses not to label herself as a feminist is irrelevant because it doesn't exclude her from the benefits of the club. Her choice to avoid the feminist label does not mean she's not deserving of feminist rights and privileges. The fact that she's an exception, an anti-feminist, doesn't alter anything. She still possesses feminist rights. The only problem is that currently, during the fifth feminist wave, a woman claiming to be a feminist is seen negatively. It alienates men and limits the quality of men she can attract. So to appeal and attract the best man possible, women today claim they're anti-feminists. She claims she's equal, yet this only helps to mislead the masses, while the man feels content with this meaningless label, believing, oh no, she's unique, I'm at ease. She still retains the benefits of feminist laws. She's not excluded from the group. She continues to keep these laws for her own advantage, using them whenever she desires, whenever it suits her. Isn't that right? She wasn't expelled from the club. In truth, this is just a ploy to distract men from the legal reality. The legal reality is that we still live in a feminist and gynocentric society where the laws are designed to protect and benefit them. Men, in many respects, are treated as second-class citizens in marriage and parenthood, forced to yield to women. The notion that women claim it's equal, the anti-feminist idea is to make the man, the little slave, feel a bit happier. It's like the slave who thinks he's not a slave. If the man had a declared feminist partner, he'd realize, oh no, I've really messed up, So that is the first part that needs to be removed. Now, why is this whole concept of egalitarianism, especially from the anti-feminist perspective, completely absurd? There's a saying, and I can't recall which Greek philosopher said it, whether it was Socrates or Plato, but it goes something like this. When you grant women equality with men, in terms of rights, social power, and political influence, you are, in fact, elevating women to a status that is superior to that of men. Why is that? Because ultimately society is gynocentric. It treats the sexes in an unequal manner, and quite absurdly, it overprotects women. There is an evolutionary reason behind this. Essentially, the maintenance and growth of a tribe are directly linked to the number of women present within it. You need women to produce more people, right? So there's a biological reason, an evolutionary reason why society has historically treated women well and protected women. You see, throughout history, women have been essential for the continuation of the human race and thus have been given a special status. It is crucial to understand that this is deeply rooted in our biology and evolution. Society has always seen the importance of safeguarding women, valuing their role in ensuring the survival and growth of the population. So much so, there was a video by Colton where he mentioned that even during times of crisis or civil war, the rate of infant mortality is higher than that of women's mortality. Society tends to care more for women than it does for children. This makes perfect sense when you observe that in most Western countries abortion has been legalized. Society goes to great lengths to prioritize women over children. It's sick, it's absurd. In fact, we've reached an absurd level where we have women who are stranded, who openly say that they don't want to get married. They don't want to have children, they're not going to have children, and yet society continues to take care of these women. Individually, the men who are in relationships with these women, or collectively, all the men paying taxes to maintain these women. So you observe how gynocentrism is not merely an inherent trait of humans, of our species, but you also recognize that it presents as a problematic, unhealthy phenomenon. It's not just natural, but it also manifests as something concerning and troubling. It is something that must be halted. Just as hypergamy needs to be halted through laws and cultural changes, gynocentrism must also be addressed similarly through legislation and cultural shifts, right? But why did I mention all of this? To illustrate the fact that if you support egalitarianism, you're oppressing men, advocating egalitarianism doesn't mean men and women have equal rights or women have political power. When you live in a society that is naturally gynocentric, right, that is going to treat women better by giving the same powers to women, you are actually oppressing men, because the man, okay, he has these political and legal powers. However, he lacks the advantage of gynocentrism, which means society in general doesn't treat him better or differently. Women, on the other hand, naturally possess this advantage. Therefore, when you provide women with the same political and legal powers, you're actually opposing women. Isn't that right? In the other question, I'm really only discussing it at the macro level, which is the level of society as a whole. But if you take a closer look and analyze it more deeply at the micro level, the fact that she says, no, I'm anti-feminist, I'm an egalitarian, I defend equality and all that, it really doesn't mean anything significant, because once again, it's just a label that holds no true weight. You have to examine the actions, and if you observe the actions of women on a large scale, especially in situations like this, you'll see, for instance, in the United States, this idea of egalitarianism started to emerge, I believe, on around 2011 and onwards. Here in Brazil, they are beginning to import. Actually, it's taking a bit longer for them to start importing. Yet we are already noticing these young girls creating videos discussing anti-feminism. There are numerous men supporting them, which ultimately doesn't mean much because, as I've mentioned before, the use of a different label in no way ensures that they won't take advantage of feminist laws. In fact, in most situations, if you even suggest to them that some feminist laws should be reconsidered or removed, they might become very upset and accuse you of being misogynist, among other things, acting in a manner similar to feminists. So the label itself doesn't hold much significance. The other problem is that on a smaller scale, in personal relationships, they still behave like any other woman. They continue to seek relationships only with men who are superior to them in some way, whether that means having higher status, more resources, or something else. And within relationships, they consistently push for the man to bear the largest share of responsibilities in the couple, covering most of the expenses and inevitably making life easier for them. So there's really no point. Notion of egalitarianism, man, is just nonsense, both on a micro and macro level. Ultimately, the primary issue, which clearly shows how nonsensical this is when you examine this, the abilities of the sexes are distinct. In sexual interactions, what does the man want? He seeks sex and reproduction, while the woman looks for protection and provision. Their goals and ways of operating differ. But fundamentally, the idea is that capacity varies. Men's physical and intellectual capacities are considered superior to women's, right? So when equal rights are granted, does it oppress men? Because the burden he carries, both in micro and macro terms, including this aspect of social expectation tied to gynocentrism, is still placed on the man. This entire burden, this entire load remains on him. Men continue to be as responsible as they always have been, right? If you examine the history of the past 150 to 200 years, with every wave of feminism that has come and gone, women have progressively gained more rights, more social power, and more political influence. However, the demands and responsibilities placed on men have persisted, and in some instances have even grown due to the hypergamy of women. Wouldn't you agree? So, what occurs when egalitarianism is promoted? Why does it in reality result in the oppression of men? Well, it's because men haven't been freed from any of their obligations. Women have gained the freedom at the cost of men. Why is that the case? Because men's responsibilities still stay the same. They continue to exist even today. And they eventually grow as society becomes increasingly unjust, with more and more feminist laws being enacted. So, essentially, by empowering women, what are you taking away from men? You're maintaining his responsibilities and even adding to them. However, you are removing the man's authority. Because when you grant more power to women, you're essentially changing the natural dynamic between the sexes, where traditionally one sex is dominant while the other is submissive. By doing so, you're empowering the sex that is naturally submissive, allowing it to no longer remain in a submissive role, right? Essentially, what you're doing is giving the woman the power to attempt to artificially raise her status to be equal to or even higher than that of the man in terms of political power and social influence. However, despite this shift, all the responsibility, all the financial obligations, and the entire burden of performance continue to rest with the man, right? So he still carries all the burden, all the responsibility, yet he no longer possesses authority. He no longer holds authority over his wife, nor does he have authority over his children. So if you consider it from this perspective, this aspect of egalitarianism serves more as an attempt to renegotiate dynamics, yet not necessarily from their end, right? Women in the past would assert, no, I'm a feminist. Back when feminism was still perceived positively, with its ideals of equality and fairness and all that, then, oh well, they managed to outsmart the man by claiming, oh, I'm a feminist, so I'll take on my share of the bills, I'll take on my share of the responsibilities. Then the guy goes out there to have a relationship with the woman and sees that it's not like that. He sees that in some cases it's even worse, right? Then time went by, men woke up to this issue of feminism, saw that the label was something negative, and what are they doing now? Now they're saying, oh no, I'm anti-feminist, I'm egalitarian, I don't know what. Then the guy goes there again, right? To trust, to relate, thinking that no, this time it's going to be different. And he sees that this same woman, like the one before her, doesn't want to give up feminist rights either. In some cases, she wants to have more rights, right? And in the relationship, she'll operate in the same way. She's going to say out of the blue that she wants equality, that she's going to help the man, that she's going to have a relationship of equals, right? In reality, this is all just an excuse to have the same authority as the man. When it comes down to it, in reality, she's going to demand that the man does it. Being socially above her means the man needs more money to cover most bills, right? That's the moment when you come to understand that egalitarianism actually preceded feminism, providing it with the necessary momentum and energy it needed to ignite feminism. This is because the business world functions in the same manner. It functions in this way because it persistently upholds men's responsibilities, steadily increasing those responsibilities. This continues until it grants increasing freedom and power to women, allowing women to eventually reach the same level of opportunity and status as men. It invariably leads to the following scenario: the man still needs to contribute more, as he still has to be above the woman. However, women can verbally express, not that I'm like you. Isn't that right? All this empowerment serves a specific purpose. Historically speaking, since the man was the one responsible for the family and made the largest contribution, he held greater decision-making authority within the family. Right? He was the one responsible in terms of having authority. The greater decision-making power is what authority represents. Egalitarianism and feminism have served an important purpose. They have ensured that men continue to have to contribute more and remain responsible. However, they have achieved this through discourse, through laws, and through empowerment. The right of a woman to enter into a relationship and not be held to the same level of responsibility as a man, while also not contributing as much to the family and the couple as a man does, yet still being granted the same level of decision-making power. It's this idea, I want a guy who's above me, superior, but they can't ever say he's superior, right? We must be seen and treated as equals. In short, I want him to keep the responsibility, but I want equal authority. And honestly, I think the part where women have the same authority as men has already happened. It's been a decade, maybe two. We're currently in a situation where men are still expected to be responsible. They are required to contribute significantly more than women, both in couples and in relationships within families. However, women have now reached a level where they possess more authority than men. Don't misunderstand me, because that earlier situation where men and women share the same level of authority simply doesn't function well. It no longer functions as intended, and it is unfair to men because we observe that in reality, things are not exactly like that. Isn't it? This is all merely discourse designed to support the female imperative, which, as we are aware, aims to ensure that women obtain the maximum resources and benefits possible with minimal effort and responsibility. Thus, you can see how egalitarianism and feminism cater to this imperative, as they persist only in that imaginary world. They remain in that imaginary world, insisting, no, we're equal, and will share responsibility and authority. However, when faced with the reality, both on a small and large scale, in personal relationships and societal laws, we realize that everything remains unchanged. The man continues to be responsible for everything. He continues to contribute more, but he has less authority. Now, the woman has the same decision-making power, or perhaps the woman has even greater decision-making power, not to mention the fact that in the end, egalitarianism doesn't even work. It doesn't exist. It's more of a fallacy than communism or socialism, for example, because in reality, every couple, a dominant and a submissive, equality doesn't exist. Oh no, we'll have equal decision-making power and share authority. If two people in a house have the same power and authority, the house doesn't function. No one is in charge and a couple is always in conflict, right? There's no order. And then when you look at it, it's all nonsense. It doesn't align with reality. The truth is, for the setup to function, for order in a home, there must be a leader and a follower. Someone leads and someone follows. Ultimately, when the man leads, as he contributes more and is accountable for everyone, the woman and children, it creates a fair scenario, right? You have fairness, sustainability, and stability. Even because instinctively men feel a sense of fulfillment when they provide for others, feeling positive about being responsible for the well-being of others. And when you have multiple instances of this occurring, with numerous families and couples acting in this manner, you create an arrangement known as civilization. This leads to patriarchy, which essentially is that society where men, due to their responsibility for families and their greater contributions to these families, hold a dominant position within those family structures, and, of course, they possess the authority. Yet, if we take a closer look at the past 100 years, especially the last 50 to 70 years, what social experiment have we truly conducted? We embarked on the social experiment of navigating through the laws and the state, granting equal authority to women, and it turned into chaos. We observed numerous divorced women, many single mothers, and a significant amount of adultery. It simply does not work. It just doesn't work. In both micro and macro perspectives, women will not carry the same burden of performance that is typically expected of men. In summary, she's not going to act with the same level of responsibility. Instead, she'll transfer the burden of her irresponsibility onto others. She won't contribute as much and will shift the cost of her minimal contribution onto others through means like alimony, taxes, and similar avenues. Consequently, it doesn't function properly. It doesn't align well. This is primarily because women aren't as capable as men, and even on an instinctive level, they lack the desire to be responsible. They desire to possess both power and authority, yet they are not eager to shoulder the same responsibilities that men do. This is precisely why they find it completely acceptable to have numerous feminist laws that solely benefit them while placing the entire burden on men. This is the true desire they harbor. Consequently, it becomes effortless for them to discuss concepts like equality and similar topics. However, in truth, when it comes to relationships, they do not act in that manner. Instead, they expect significantly more from men because all of this aligns with the feminine imperative. They don't want to be exactly like men entirely. They don't want to have the same burden of performance. They don't want to have to contribute as much as men. They don't want to have to be as responsible as men. The only thing they want is the same power as men. They want to have the same authority. This is practically childish behavior. It's just like a child, just like a teenager. That child or that teenager who looks at the adult and only sees the good side. Look, this adult man here is free. He can choose to do whatever he desires and whenever he wishes to do it. What children and teenagers, especially young women, often fail to notice is this: they only perceive the positive side. They only see that a man can be significantly freer than a woman, that a man can act on his own will, that a man holds authority. However, they rarely acknowledge the cost or the price that a man must pay for acquiring this freedom and authority. The undeniable truth is that a man must be self-sufficient, which means he needs to rely on himself. Additionally, a man is expected to carry more responsibility on his shoulders. This applies to both the micro level, such as in personal relationships, and the macro level, encompassing society as a whole. In both these arenas, a man tends to give much more than he receives in return. Women, regardless of whether they identify as feminist, anti-feminist, or neutral, typically do not desire this reality. At their core, what they truly seek is to have the same level of power and authority as men. However, they are not inclined to bear the same burdens or pay the equivalent price that comes with such power and authority.